In the world of YouTube video essays, there is one phrase that you constantly hear in the video game scene. The perfect video game doesn't exist. People will talk about their favorite games of all time in the entire industry and believe that despite there being so many amazing titles, no matter what, the perfect video game just doesn't seem to be out there. But what if I told you that the perfect game has been right in front of us the entire time? The perfect video game isn't some hidden indie gem in the depths of Steam slop. It isn't a game that only a few thousand people played as a kid, because the perfect video game is Portal 2. Think about this for a second. If you've played Portal 2 when you were younger, or you've played it recently, I want you to think of a single flaw that the game had. Just a single one. It can be a nitpick or a huge issue that you have with it. I highly doubt you'd find one easily, or even one at all. I have thought about this a ton. I've replayed both Portal 1 and 2 just looking for a single issue that they had, and even when I think I found one in Portal 2, it just goes to prove that it isn't an issue at all, and the things that I see as a flaw from the beginning just work itself out, and I no longer see it as an issue and more as a way to enhance the experience. Guys, Portal 2 might be the perfect video game, and to help me prove that, I have to answer the question: how come when it comes to reflecting on video games, movies, or any form of media really, the general public doesn't end up looking back so fondly when it left them blown away at first? Well, there are two reasons for this. One happens to be more common than the other. First, it's just really hard to achieve perfection. There might be a video game that made you cry when you first experienced it, and when trying to replay it, it just doesn't feel the same as when you first played it. Or it's just a plot point that doesn't hit the same or anything like that. It's just stuff that can't be experienced more than once. That does hinder itself from being perfect. Or it would be an amazing video game, but it just has one single flaw that holds it back from being a perfect video game. The example I love going to when thinking about this is Red Dead Redemption 2 or Grand Theft Auto 5. I adored these experiences when I played them. I loved the stories for completely different reasons. The combat is some of the cleanest out there. However, there's no real way to enjoy these games in different ways. When you're told to park a car in a secluded area, there's only a few, if even more than one, where you can park this car. You can only really complete missions doing one thing most of the time, apart from the few times you get to pick what you end up doing, but even then, that's just picking which scripted sequence you want to go through. The games sort of just play themselves a lot of the time. And listen y'all, I'm a Dishonored fan, so that might not mean a lot to you, but to me personally, and to a lot of other people, that is an issue that does come up, and it would be an issue at play with these games. Or it's a Bethesda game where it can be great, then you realize you may have accidentally started to enjoy a Bethesda game like a fucking loser. Go play something better, bro. But the other reason is just that people often try to find the negatives in what they experience. You can be blown away by an experience, but you'll just think of one flaw, therefore the game is no longer perfect. Halo 3 has nothing but good levels. Shut up, Cortana is a good level, you're just bad. But the Cortana moments just fucking suck, dude. It just slows down the game for no reason. And every time that I actually am replaying Halo 3, which is pretty often, I just sigh out of annoyance every time it comes up. Mirror's Edge has literally the greatest first-person platforming in video games, but the combat in this game, it sucks. It's not good. And yes, the pros in Mirror's Edge and Halo 3 outweigh the cons in every department possible, but it's still a flaw that hinders itself from being perfect. These aren't very fleshed out or very good parts of the game, which might be why Portal, or to make things easier to understand for later, Portal 1 is damn near perfect. These puzzles test your brain but aren't really difficult to understand. The goal is pretty obvious. GLaDOS places you in a testing chamber and you have to find a way out of the elevator at the end of the chambers. You're given a portal gun and are sent off. The game sort of lets you do whatever you want after you're done with that. You figure out that the white surfaces can be portaled on and everything else can't be. And the beginning chambers teach the player everything that the game can do with these portals. Portals can obviously teleport you, they can teleport boxes weigh down buttons that will either move platforms or open doors, and arguably the most important part of the puzzle solving that isn't the title of the game is that momentum carries through portals, which is going to be used a lot throughout the rest of the game. I feel like the portal mechanic separates itself from the other puzzle games out there, because once you understand the mechanics, it turns less from a typical puzzle game with a unique portal mechanic into more of a puzzle sandbox similar to the Half-Life games with the physics system. Yes, you can go through this entire chamber with this cube and orb puzzle, but instead, with the prime gamer knowledge, you can just skip the entire chamber by creating momentum with these portals, then just launching yourself to the end of the level right from the start. This is what makes Portal 1 almost perfect, because it has these levels that can be played by pretty much anybody with the way that you choose how you would like to play baked into the level design. And man, the writing, the atmosphere just tells you what this world is like before you're even told yourself. With things such as the office rooms that you'd imagine would have scientists monitoring the testing being empty. The Ratman Den saying that the cake you were promised to finish your testing is a lie, but the continuous reminder that you're gonna get cake after all of this is done makes you a cake liar denier, and ha, eat shit, I'm right. And Gladys's voice is just, oh. When you first launch the game and hear her voice, it's very clearly a robot, but one that seems friendly enough to trust what she has to say. But as the game proceeds and she just talks to you more, her voice starts sounding less trustworthy and more uncanny, with her saying things like how to
Good job. As part of a required test protocol, we will stop enhancing the truth in 3, 2,
or what she says when the turrets are introduced. It's
due to mandatory scheduled maintenance, the appropriate chamber for this testing sequence is currently unavailable. It has been replaced with a live fire course designed for military androids. The Enrichment Center apologizes for the inconvenience and wishes you the best of luck.
or even just casually dropping the fact that
the experiment is nearing its conclusion. The Enrichment Center is required to remind you that you will be baked, and then there will be cake.
All without her tone changing whatsoever. And bro, the ending is just holy shit. GLaDOS telling you after an escape sequence because she tried burning you alive and sending an army of turrets to try and kill you, and she explains how every scientist in Aperture Science was killed by a neurotoxin that she put through the lab, and they had to put a bunch of corruption cores onto her just so she would.
It was a morality core they installed after I flooded the Enrichment Center with a deadly neurotoxin to make me stop flooding the Enrichment Center with a deadly neurotoxin.
And you have to destroy these to take her out? I'm a certified GLaDOS writing glazer, and I'm proud. 10,000 subscribers and I'll make that into a shirt. But as I said earlier, Portal 1 is almost perfect, because there's some minor flaws in the game that hold it back from perfection. For instance, the flying orb puzzle tool is a very poor puzzle tool for the sole reason that it is very imprecise and slow. You sort of have to guess where you need to place the portal in order for it to go through them and complete the puzzles. And because it effectively operates on a cycle, there's no real way to speed these chambers up once you run through the game again other than speed placing your portals, but even then it's a separate object moving at the same speed no matter what, which means you can only complete these chambers as fast as the orbs will let you. This next one is just a personal gripe I have with video game lore in general, but I really dislike that in order to break down what goes on in a video game world, you have to go to a different form of media, in this case a comic book, just to understand what goes on in a specific game. In order to understand more than just GLaDOS getting a power surge and killing everyone in the facility, you have to read the game's comic books. Other series like Dishonored, which I can't stop mentioning in this video for some reason, has comic books as well, but in this case, the entire world of Dishonored was explained in both Dishonored 1, Dishonored 2, and the third game nobody cared about, and the comic book simply took what was in that world and made a story from it. But for Portal, it's more like it takes what's in the world and then makes a required story to understand what's going on instead. And arguably the biggest issue with the game is the final boss itself, again presented beautifully. Conceptually it's amazing, but actually playing it isn't very fun. To fight this boss, you need to align a portal with a rocket that a robot shoots at you, then you make that rocket go through the portal and hit GLaDOS and knock off a corruption core and throw it into an incinerator. Sounds easy enough, but it gets worse. Because it doesn't seem so bad on paper, but man, it's annoying trying to line up those portals for the rockets to hit GLaDOS. And with her wiggling around so much, you could have a shot that seems like it would line up perfectly, only for it to barely miss. That shit is just annoying as hell. It's not fun when you think you're doing everything right, but there's just one thing out of your control that makes you fail what you're trying to do. These three issues aren't too big of a deal, and may not take it away from being a 10 out of 10 video game, but it pushes it away from perfection. So when Portal 1 was a huge success and time came for a sequel, this gave Valve the opportunity to fix these issues and enhance the experience to ultimately take a near perfect game and file it into perfection. It's a frugal task, but let's just play the game and I'll show you how they did it. Holy guacamole, this game is awesome. It looks amazing, one of the best looking games on the Source engine. The puzzles are fantastic, the writing is incredible. God damn it, this is one of the funniest video games I've ever played. Portal 2 does everything right, and I can say with full confidence it is the perfect video game. How, you may ask? Well, allow me to tell you, starting from the beginning. The game opens up with you as an unnamed protagonist. It's Chell. They don't ever say it directly in the game, but the end credits and some certain game objects just tell you that it's Chell. Or are you? Yes, you are. When waking up in this containment center of sorts, you're asked by an automated voice that isn't Gladys to look around and stare at a painting as a form of a check-in program. Then you're asked to go back to sleep.
Good morning. You have been in suspension for 9999999. This courtesy call is to inform you
Anyone
that
in
all
there?
test subjects should vacate the enrichment
Hello?
center immediately. Any test subject
Are you
not emerging
gonna open
from
the door
suspension at this time
at any
will be
time?
assumed to have...
Ha! Ah! Oh God, you look good. Looking good, actually.
This is Wheatley, a little blue ball friend that is going to be our guide for the first few chapters of the game. Already, this is very different from Portal 1, because in there you're all alone for the entire game until the very end with Gladys. So having this funny ball guy in the introduction is a huge change from the original. But Portal 2 takes full advantage of this change by using them to give you I originally wanted to separate the game's writing entirely from any other segment in the game, but the writing of Portal 2 really can't be separated from a lot of what Portal 2 does. That isn't me saying that the writing can't be separated when I discuss it later, because I will, but there are a lot of parts where the writing directly ties into things such as teaching the player about the game world or how to outright play the game. In fact, the very beginning of this game immediately emphasizes this idea, with this sequence not even 5 minutes into the game.
But don't be alarmed, all right? Although if you do feel alarmed, try to hold on to that feeling, because that is the proper reaction to being told that you've got brain damage. Do you understand what I'm saying at all? Does any of this make any sense? Just tell me. Just say yes. Okay, what you're doing there is jumping. You just jump.
Portal 2 takes its very comedic writing as a way to teach the player how to jump. The very first tutorial in the game about portals is how to jump, but you barely notice it because it parodies the traditional video game tutorials by telling you that saying apple is bound to the spacebar, which I think is just really funny to think about when you realize that every time you're jumping in the game, Chell thinks that she's saying apple, which is just really funny to think about in hindsight. In fact, you don't get the portal gun for a little while. Your first tutorial after the opening cinematic where Wheatley shows his driving skills about as good as my sister's.
But if anyone asks, tell them as far as you know, the last time you checked, everyone looked pretty much alive. Alright? Not dead.
Isn't how to use the portal gun, but instead it teaches you how portals work in general. This is a good game design choice because there's a very good chance that somebody is experiencing a portal game for the first time and wouldn't fully understand how the portal mechanic works in this world. Portal 2's opening chambers are very similar, if not carbon copies of Portal 1's opening chambers. Portal 1 opening chambers did a great job at teaching the players the mechanics of the game that they're in, so when making Portal 2, there's a good reason to just use a lot of these tutorials to teach new players how to play the game and be familiar with the game mechanics about as good as players of the first game. But there are some mechanics that are new to Portal 2, or just changes in the game that players of Portal 1 might not be familiar to. So this never feels tedious for people who have played Portal before. Take the Q button tutorial from Portal 1. This tutorial did a great job at teaching the player that almost everything in the chamber is connected without the player needing to spend too much time thinking about it, along with teaching the player that the items in the game world are able to go through portals just as well as Chell can. Portal 2 does the exact same thing, but with buttons to change where one of the portal locations are, rather than an automated sequence that can only go so fast. This puzzle in Portal 2 does effectively the same thing that Portal 1 does in teaching the mechanic involving portals. The only difference, and I'd argue improvement, is that you can now learn this at your own pace. And Portal 2's way of teaching is a 100% better way of executing Valve's design philosophy when teaching a player. The way Valve teaches players how certain mechanics work is with one of two ways. I'll only explain the first one in this video because it's the only one that's really relevant to Portal 2, so you'll just have to wait for the Half-Life video that'll happen at some point so that you can hear the other reason. That's right, you have to subscribe and turn on notifications and know the other half of it. I have you in my grasp and I will take full advantage of it. When introducing a new game mechanic, the game will first introduce you to the mechanic by showing you what it does without much player input. Then it will lock you into a room until you learn how to do it yourself. In Half-Life, they'll do things such as having a scientist run directly into a laser-sensored explosive, then in the very next room they'll put more of the explosive explosives into a room and trust the player to figure out that these blue lasers aren't to be messed with. Or in Half-Life 2, after teaching you that boxes can be moved and climbed in the game, will lock you in a room and the only way to progress is by picking up a box and moving into a spot where you can climb it and continue on with the level. By the end of these tutorials, you will understand how the mechanic works and can move on with the game with this mechanic showing up for the rest of it, and you won't feel confused at all as to why you aren't able to progress and jump up this higher platform. And for Portal 2, which happens to be the subject matter for this video, I know, crazy right? Being able to figure out how portals and boxes at your own pace is an excellent use of this design philosophy. You're locked into a chamber until you're familiar with how moving portals works, and then, and only then, will they give you the ability to place portals yourself. But with the automatic portal placements in Portal 1, the tutorial doesn't seem to do as an effective job at teaching you how to play, which is probably why there's a much larger percentage of in the first game that doesn't give you the ability to place both portals, because new players likely aren't fully familiar with that portal mechanic by then. And once you get familiar with the portal mechanic in Portal 2, that's where the game really picks up, because Wheatley wants to help you escape the facility after you've been asleep for however the hell long, and in the process of trying to find the escape pod, he accidentally wakes up a familiar face.
Oh, it's you.
You know her?
It's been a long time.
And now, the game can really begin. Alright, I got a confession for y'all. I'm fucking stupid. Puzzle games confuse the ever-living hell out of me, and despite my enjoyment of the genre, I've never really been able to get better thinking skills out of it because I'm not that smart. I'm not gonna self-diagnose myself with any disorders, but I just don't think that well when it comes to video games, and I often give up on many puzzle games for that reason, unfortunately. So when I say I was able to make it through these puzzles without much struggle, it really goes to show how well these puzzles are designed. Portal 2 doesn't have better designed puzzles than something like Return of the Obra Dinn or Baba Is You, but what it does have is some of the best designed puzzles that anybody can have a good time getting through. So let's just get into those, starting with Portal's flagship puzzles, the Once you get access to using both portals in Gladys's chambers, the idea of Portal being a puzzle sandbox really starts to stand out. Specifically, once you get to Chapter 3, where the mechanic introductions end and the true thinking with portals can begin. For example, in Chamber 10 in the Gladys chambers, you need to use the propulsion plates to bring a single cube with you to the top of the chamber and solve the puzzle. Yes, you are technically following a specific solution that was set by the developers, but with how the game taught you how to use these new tools in a way that made it feel like you were the one who made the solution. And don't get me wrong, this is not the same as Portal 1's Freedom, where you can do some bullshit with portals and momentum and stuff like that, but it's like that for good reason at this point. By this point, the player might not be fully ready to make their own solutions entirely on their own, and for players that might be, these puzzles still give that feeling of creativity when thinking with portals. Let's fucking go! He said the thing! Which is why I think we need to take a little trip down to below aperture. So let's ask the only good case of Blue Ball nicely to take us down there, but oh no, he didn't like us calling him a moron. And oh, Gladys is a potato and smash, smash, smash. I'll get to the story later, just give me a minute, I promise. The ruins are by far the most controversial part of Portal 2 and may be the biggest argument against the purpose of this video. This specific area in the game was able to make some people, specifically these two guys from the super secret content creator server I'm in, who when I brought up this video idea to them, they said that Portal 2 was a 7 out of 10 at best, and the ruins section is a huge reason for that. Y'all, hear me out. Hear me out. I think they're fucking stupid. But the reason that they think this way about the ruins is a reason that I actually do empathize with. They said that the ruins were incredibly difficult to navigate, with unclear directioning and eventually needing to look up a guide just to find out where to go for 2 seconds. This issue generally comes up in some shitty indie horror game or something like that, but for Portal 2, that just isn't the case. And honestly, I think it's safe to say that this issue that people have is on the player and not the game, simply because they failed at learning the rules of the world that they're playing in. Basically, no, literally every single good game ever made, the game sets rules that the player needs you to follow in order to get through it. Devil May Cry's rule, Mario 64's rule is that in order to progress, you need to collect stars. For enemies, something like Halo, the elites have shields that you need to break before you can actually start killing them. These are things that are set in stone that you need to learn in order to be able to progress through the game that you're playing. As long as the game does an effective job at setting these rules, then it officially goes to being the responsibility of the player to keep these rules in mind throughout their playthrough. It is not the game's fault if they do not keep this in mind throughout the playthrough. Now we need to answer, what are Portal 2's rules established for game progression? It's quite simple. Look for the white surfaces that can be portaled. And the game makes that very clear because up until the point of the ruins, Portal 2 very well established that portable surfaces in the game are the white ones. So once you enter the ruins, that shouldn't mean that you have to stop keeping this rule in mind when trying to traverse. Looking through the environment in order to progress through the ruins is essential to progressing through the game just like the rest of it. And these aren't hard to find at all, they just require a little bit more looking around than you might do in the chambers. If you see a portable surface in a place that you weren't just at, then that is very likely where you need to go. Arguably the most confusing part of this entire section in the entirety of the ruins and Cave Johnson section is just this one area where you need to shoot a portal through this slightly open door, which may take a minute to find it, but even then it isn't that hard. Clearly you aren't going anywhere with all these other portable surfaces, so it's on the player to look through all of these spots that they might think are usable and might help them progress. So no, this isn't Portal 2's fault that your smelly ass got confused. You simply didn't keep the rules of the world in mind when getting put into a different setting of the world. But do you know who else doesn't know the rules of the world though? Let's just say you broke up with your girlfriend for very similar reasons, ladies and gentlemen, because let me introduce you to our favorite blue ball Wheatley for his chambers. Once GLaDOS discovers the concept of killing an AI with the paradox, and we finish the Cave Johnson yapping and his chambers about teaching you the gels, we enter Wheatley's chambers. Now Wheatley is what we like to call in the industry stupid, and we'll get to that later, but for now the context is that Wheatley's entire life purpose was to be a complete and utter moron, and his chambers show. His starting chambers are awful and incredibly easy, so these are very simple to get through. But only a few chambers into his segment, and he found a stockpile of some of GLaDOS's unfinished chambers, and he just starts to kind of push them together or just use a finished one that she completely forgot about up until now. While these chambers are effectively just more GLaDOS chambers, I believe that this perfectly fits into the game world. Wheatley is such a moron that he can't even make his own chambers that are good, and his best work is poorly throwing some unfinished tests that don't seem to work well together, but by this point you should have a very good understanding of the game mechanics that you are able to figure out these chambers anyways. Now talking about the chambers themselves, I feel like these are without a doubt the best chambers in the game. Using the knowledge that you as the player should have gained throughout your playthrough that give the challenging puzzles that may start you off as mildly confused, but once you put all the pieces together and every single one of them end up making sense. This is a key element to good game design. By the time you get to the end of the game, that is the point where you should be able to take everything that the game has thrown at you up until this point. Portal 2 makes sure that you are familiar with all of these mechanics at play up until the Wheatley chambers by keeping them present throughout every chapter. The aerial faith plates have been present through most of the game. The gels were just introduced and used at their absolute best here, and the momentum, God, this game is just so fucking good, bro. So while Portal 2 does everything it does perfectly as a standalone game, the fact that it's a sequel is something to keep in mind. And there is an important thing that a sequel needs to do in order to be a good sequel, such as taking what the games in the series have done before and improving on it. And Portal 2 does so much in order to fix Portal 1's imperfections. I wouldn't say that Portal 1's pacing is awful. I'd actually say that it's pretty good because there isn't a single boring moment. But I will say, man, it takes a while to be able to use both portals on your own. I wouldn't say that I'm a god at Portal 1, but I've replayed it a good amount of times, and my typical playthrough if I'm trying to get through the game is around an hour. I've beaten it in less time, but for the sake of this video, I will say that the general person in a replay, or maybe even a first playthrough, will take about an hour to finish the first game. Getting the second half of the portal gun takes around 15 minutes just to get to the chamber that you can get it. That is a whole quarter of the game where you don't have the full power of the portal gun in a game called, well, I hope you know how to read, because I sure as hell don't. While 15 minutes doesn't seem like it's that long, you have to keep in mind the percentage of the game is outrageously large. I feel like this is just me saying that this is awful and Portal 1 failed in the pacing department at the beginning of the game, but it's less me saying that this is bad and more that me saying that it could be better. And I'd say Portal 2 does it better. The playthrough that you're seeing right now is me replaying the game again basically a day or two after I beat it because my recording corrupted and it took me roughly 4 hours to beat the game. A little less than that, but I kept using the bathroom, then realizing that I forgot to press play on the recording and would miss a few minutes, so let's just estimate a good 4 hours. I got the full Portal gun in 26 minutes, give or take. I'll be nice and round it up to 30 minutes for the average player. While that is technically a longer span of time than in Portal 1, if you do the math, that's only an eighth of the game where you can't place both portals yourself. Compared to the 1/4 or 25%, that's a significant amount less than the predecessor. And even with that lower percentage of the game, it still does just as well reintroducing the old mechanics and some of the new mechanics involving portals. I don't know about you, but I'd call that an improvement. Earlier I talked about how these orbs are sort of a detriment to the game because they can be imprecise and slow down players when on a roll. Portal 2's solution to this issue is just boom, laser. It goes out immediately. You can see exactly where the laser is pointing at all times and there is no waiting. It just adds to the playing at your own pace that I emphasized earlier, something that's better for a game like this instead of just doing the right thing and waiting for things to happen for you. But if you ask me, the best improvement from Portal 1 that Portal 2 has to offer is the final boss. As established earlier in the video, Portal 1's final boss kinda sorta sucks. Portal 2's final boss against Wheatley takes this concept and improves on it to make it less frustrating. Wheatley throws the explosives at you now instead of some lining up, effectively the same thing as Portal 1's final boss, just done a little bit differently, and all of the spots where you can place a portal to get the explosive to launch right back at Wheatley are in spots that you can't really miss, and it does the pesky task of lining up annoying shots for you. That doesn't mean that the final fight doesn't require much player thought, because you still have to keep in mind that everything that Wheatley is using for defense. The neurotoxin is back, which kills you when the timer runs out, and Wheatley has shields to protect himself from attacks in certain directions, so you have to think about where you're placing your portals. And the corruption cores you're putting into Wheatley to take him out are in spots requiring you to take full advantage of the momentum mechanic in Portal 2 to grab them mid-air as they say some funny lines, then stick them onto Wheatley as they say more funny lines. The final boss is leagues more enjoyable than Portal 1 with Gladys, taking the concept of the original fight and improving on where it goes wrong. Because as I said earlier, the concept of Portal 1's final boss was amazing, it was just executed poorly. So seeing in Portal 2 it fixes those poorly executed parts is really nice because that just makes it a better experience. Portal 2 does an excellent job at just being a good video game, a good sequel, and ultimately it could be the perfect game with just all of what I've described up until this point. But if you've played Portal 2, you already know that it doesn't stop at just being an incredible video game in terms of gameplay. It also happens to excel in the industry with the Portal 2 has some of the funniest and best writing in video games ever. For all intents and purposes, there's nothing wrong with Portal 1's writing. It was going for a specific tone and absolutely nailed it. And Portal 2 goes for a wildly different tone and it nails that as well. Every single character in this game has, well, character. Each and every single one of the characters present in this game have such creative writing that they all end up being memorable and a gaming icon. But I'm not your typical gaming video essayist, so I'll just give the brief rundown. Gladys is truly a that one bitch character. She will insult you in so many ways, mostly calling you fat and saying that your parents don't love you, but they aren't the middle school type of insults, and they are set up so incredibly well. My favorite one is 100% the Ariel faith plate joke, where you just go up to one of these, and she intentionally said it so you don't bounce as high just to make a fat joke.
What happened, right? I was just lying there. You thought
This plate must not be calibrated to someone of your generousness. I'll add a few zeros to the maximum weight. You look great, by the way. Very healthy.
Or alternatively, she sets you up for a huge surprise, which is implied that you're meeting your parents again. Then she just makes it all up and is just a huge asshole.
Surprise.
And then she just makes up calling your parents just to say that they don't love you.
The birth parents you are trying to reach do not love you. Please hang up.
Oh, that's sad. But impressive. Maybe they worked at the phone company.
And then when she turns into a potato and Wheatley tries the same joke on you, she just flips it right back onto him and makes him look like the asshole.
So let's try her way, all right? Fatty, adopted fatty, fatty, no parents. What?
What exactly is wrong with being adopted?
What's wrong with being adopted? Lack of parents.
For the record, you are adopted and that's terrible.
And
Just
also,
work with me.
nothing. But some.
And as for Wheatley, as I said before, he's a complete and utter moron. So a lot of his jokes are just him being stupid, like being unable to perform some actions if you're looking at him because he's too embarrassing, when in reality he's just pressing some internal buttons that you can't even see him press. So when he gets a power trip after replacing Gladys and she calls him a moron, he does not like that, so he starts bashing your elevator to prove that he's not a moron, as if that would do anything, just to accidentally smash the elevator a little bit too hard, so you and Potato Gladys end up falling down a giant ass pit. Also, the fact that Gladys turns into a potato is really funny. So there's that going for it too. I think the best jokes are honestly the ones where Gladys and Wheatley work together in a way to make the joke more funny. The two best examples of this are the ones where Gladys is actually using the paradox against Wheatley, but Wheatley is so stupid that he doesn't understand that it's a paradox and answers the question that cannot be answered.
Alright, paradox time. This sentence is false. Don't think about it. Don't think about it.
True. I'll go true.
And without a doubt, the best joke in the game is just, let me show you.
Well, this is the part where he kills us.
Hello. This is the part where I kill you. Had a bit of a brainwave.
You know, I'm just gonna say it, kids these days, they will not appreciate how funny that joke is. And finally, there's Cave Johnson, the founder of Aperture Science, who got lucky selling shower curtains one day and wanted to pursue science without knowing a thing about science, so he wasted all of his money on random ass things because science. I think there's one line in the entire game that perfectly shows off Cave Johnson's character, so I'll just let that whole thing play out for you.
When life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade.
Yeah.
Make life take the lemons back.
Yeah.
Get mad.
Yeah.
I don't want your damn lemons. What am I supposed to do with these?
Yeah, take the lemons.
Demand to see life's manager.
Yeah.
Make life rue the day it thought it could give Cave Johnson lemons. Do you know who I am? I'm the man who's gonna burn your house down with the lemons.
Oh, I like this
I'm
guy.
gonna get my engineers to invent a combustible lemon that burns your house
Burn
down.
his house down. Burning people. He said what we're all thinking.
The point is, if we can store music on a compact disc, why can't we store a man's intelligence and personality on one?
I am not kidding when I say that I was laughing my ass off when I first heard this line, because I genuinely forgot this line existed, because up until the point of making this video, I haven't played Portal 2 since 2022, and it is currently 2024, so when I heard this line, I just had to stop because I was laughing too hard at this joke. And the best part is, this is just one of his lines. He says some absolutely hilarious stuff that I was just laughing a ton to, along with the rest of the cast, who said just funny as hell stuff, and I would always find myself stopping my moving around just to laugh. I believe that Portal 2 has some of the greatest writing because I believe it can only happen in a video game. The Aerial Faith Play joke would never hit the same if it was done in a movie or a TV show. The Cave Johnson lemon rant is funny because it could happen at any point once you get through a specific section. And Wheatley can only have these good jokes based on your interactions with the world. Because something like whether or not you catch Wheatley,
Okay, ready? One. Catch me, catch. Ow. Ow.
can only be effective if there's a person that can actually interact with stuff like this. And I genuinely believe that because writing in this game would only work if there's interactivity going on. Unlike something like The Last of Us, where it could pretty effectively translate the exact story into a TV show. Though I'm not too sure on that one. I think someone needs to make a video or something looking into that. Portal 2 takes full advantage of its medium, and therefore its writing cannot be replicated into other mediums. I mentioned this in my Hi-Fi Rush video, but since none of you watched that, I'll talk about it again. But I think there's a super underrated part of the video game development process being when you should roll the credits. Before you go spamming into the comments about that one Rasputin video, I want you to hear me out. While his video does a great job about talking about experiencing extra content and what have you, I want to talk about an aspect that he didn't really touch on at all. For every piece of media, but most notably video games, there's a point where it can go a little bit too far and start to feel stale. So it's up to the developers to know when to roll credits before that ends up happening. This means knowing when the mechanics are fully fleshed out and everything you can do to keep these mechanics fun to play, and right before it starts to overstay its welcome, you wrap things up in a pretty little bow and ship it off into the world. And I think Portal 2 does this excellently. There are only so many things that you can make puzzles involving portals, launchers, gels, and gravity tubes out of before it starts to get boring, which probably explains why most Portal 2 mods add a mechanic or two in order to make them feel like a fresh new experience. But there's a very light line that is drawn between where what you can do with these mechanics are fun and what you can do with these mechanics that end up feeling tedious. Valve seemed aware of this when designing Portal 2 because man, there isn't a single point in this game where I feel like something overstayed its welcome. Messing with gels never got frustrating because they didn't stick around long enough to get to that point. Gravity funnels never stopped being fun to experiment with because they never overstayed their welcome. And most importantly, it never got boring thinking with portals because they knew where that line was and they never crossed it. This is a key point when considering if Portal 2 is the perfect video game or not. Whether or not it gets boring. And, well, Portal 2 never gets boring. It lets you have your fun, then ends where your fun might stop. So yeah, Portal 2 is the perfect video game. And if you haven't played it, then I think you need to set some time aside to do a playthrough yourself. It's a really fun time, and I know you will enjoy yourself. And if you have played it before, then go into the comments and say how much you agree with the video essayist on YouTube. I think we have a little bit of a misunderstanding here. Because this entire whatever length of this video is at now, Jesus fuck, this wasn't supposed to be this long, I may have given the wrong idea here. So I think that it's important to say that the perfect game doesn't mean it's better than the rest. Yes, I just spent a good chunk of time glazing the ever-living hell out of Portal 2. But I want to preface that while Portal 2 is the perfect video game, it doesn't mean that it's the greatest game that ever made and every game is beneath it. Because that is just not true. There are tons of games out there that you may prefer playing over Portal 2. Unless your favorite game is actually just Portal 2, then I really don't know what to say here. You may have your 20 playthroughs of Nier Automata or 100%ed Elden Ring 8 times, making it very clear that you prefer one game that sits in your heart more than Portal 2. In fact, I'm the same way. Despite the title of this video, there is a shocking thing that I think you need to hear. Yes, Halo 3 is my favorite game of all time. I've switched that answer after I first played Halo 3, not really before because I played it when I was 4 years old, but no matter how many times I change what my favorite game is, I always find myself coming back to Halo 3, so I think it's safe to say that that's just my favorite video game. And yeah, I enjoyed my time with Half-Life 2 a lot more than I did with Portal 2. In fact, Half-Life 2 is my favorite game developed by Valve and my second favorite game on the Source engine. You can enjoy something more than what may be deemed as perfect. It all comes down to your own preferences in what games you like to play and your own experiences whatever titles you put time into. Like for me, Halo 3 was one of the first games I've ever played. I played it co-op with my dad when I was young and then proceeded to replay it over and over again afterwards on my own, and that one game was not only a part of the fuse that brought me into making content about video games that I like, but it was also one of my early memories of bonding with my dad. Shout out to all the awesome dads out there, by the way. Y'all are pretty cool. My knees, bro. And even then, I can list a fair amount of issues that Halo 3 have and even Half-Life 2 have that will bring me to the conclusion that those games aren't perfect. And the two games that I mentioned earlier, I bet people who have played those games countless and those are their favorite games can think of plenty of flaws that reside in them. I personally can list a very good amount of flaws with Elden Ring if I wanted to. Too bad I don't want to do that right now. But that just isn't the case with Portal 2, because in my eyes, Portal 2 does everything it does perfectly. There isn't a single design flaw I can think of when it comes to Portal 2. Even when I try to nitpick, which I find myself doing a lot nowadays ever since I started making YouTube videos, I just can't seem to nitpick a single thing about it. What? The Ratman dens are slightly more out of the way than they are in Portal 1. Yeah, nice try, asshole. Everything Portal 2 does is done perfectly. It's really fleshed out in all of its mechanics. Its writing is done incredibly well, and it also just is a really beautiful game. I didn't even bother to talk about that because it just kind of speaks for itself. All of that led me to the conclusion that Portal 2 is the perfect video game because it can only be done in a video game. And what is done here is just done without a single design flaw. I don't need to repeat myself anymore, but I'm gonna do it anyways. After an in-depth look of Portal 2 and everything it has in store, I hope I've convinced you well enough that Portal 2 is the perfect video game. It excels at everything that it does, and it's just one of the few games out there that I believe it can be enjoyed by anybody. The fact that even if you remove its amazing writing, you can still have a really good game goes to show how well it does at everything that it does. If you haven't played Portal 2 yet and made it to the end of this video, then I hope this video was the push that you needed to give it a try, because I know for a fact it's been on your mind for a while. And if you have played Portal 2, then why not do me a favor and leave a comment talking about your experience with the game, or talk about whatever points that you thought stood out from the video, or something that just proves me wrong. I'm serious when I say this. I'm not gonna be mad if you have a really good counterpoint. Alright, and with that, that's the end of the video. I had a different outro recorded earlier, but a lot of new developments happened with this video while I was making it, so I have to re-record it and give some proper shout-outs to some creators. I want to shout out a few creators because they helped a lot with this video, and it wouldn't be the same video without them. First and foremost, I want to thank YouTuber Fuzz Pixels. He made the Want You Gone cover that I used in the montage at the beginning of the video, and it's playing right now as well. He does a lot of amazing video game OST covers of stuff like Final Fantasy, Portal. Obviously, he has a Still Alive cover as well, and he just does amazing covers of music, so definitely give him a check out. Next, I want to thank Games Foundation. He's a good friend of mine, and he edited the first like 7 seconds of the video because I do not know how to motion track as of right now, and I was not gonna learn that on a video that I was already taking way longer than it should have. So thank you so much to Games Foundation for doing that for me. You're fucking awesome. Next, I want to thank my boy Farty. He also does YouTube. Check out his YouTube channel. He makes video game reviews and stuff like that. Nothing too crazy, but the reason that I want to shout him out is because he reads all of my scripts for these videos. Like, completely, like, willing to, and it's fucking awesome. And the videos wouldn't be as good if it weren't for him. Next, I want to shout out Viddy and Michael. They're both really fucking cool. They were the two that basically gave me the entire counterpoint for the ruins section, and it made the video go from just a yap sesh with no rebuttal to a yap sesh with an actual argument to defend. So they definitely helped with the quality of the video, even if they didn't directly mean to. And then I want to shout out my buddy Fako for being a fucking bitch. Nah, he's awesome. He's a really good rival and a really good friend of mine. And definitely check out his channel. He makes anime stuff. So with that being said, that's the end of the video here. Thank you guys so much for fucking watching that. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to find me in other places, I got a Twitch account I don't stream on. I got a backlogged account for the backlog video. If you haven't seen that, definitely check that out. I have a back catalog that you can watch. Definitely give that a go. If you like this, there's just more of that from the last few videos. I got a Blue Sky. I also have a Twitter, but you don't have to follow that. That's fucking ignore. You can ignore that. But Blue Sky, that's where I basically treat like Twitter, and it's a lot better. So definitely check that out. And that's it. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.